Well, thank you all for joining me this morning here. My name is Juliet Simone, and I am Community Health Manager at the Oasis Institute in St. Louis, Missouri. And this topic today is called Free from Falls. It's good to go ahead and just level set a definition. I think we all know what a fall is, but if we're going to talk about falls for 20 minutes or so, let's define what it is first. Usually going down, sometimes fast, from a higher level to a lower level. And this is important to just have a quick distinction because sometimes people think that falling is only from being upright to being on the floor, but you can fall into a chair too. And if the chair weren't there to get you, then you would probably be on the floor. So we're going to look at ways to help keep the strength up so that no one's falling even into something like a chair or a couch. People of all ages fall. We all know that. We've all fallen ourselves, whether when we were little kids, as adults, maybe even more recently. However, older adults are more likely to fall for many reasons. It's so common, in fact, that 1 in 4 older adults report a fall each year. And that number is obviously smaller than we think actually happens in the community because many minor falls are not going to be reported. And you can see here that 74 older adults die in the US every day due to a fall. So falls do increase with age. There is a relationship, a positive relationship between age and the amount of falls. The important takeaway from this is that there is a relationship. So, and that will be relevant with another point here. Reporting, so of the 25% of older adults that report a fall each year, as stated in the previous slide, about 20% of those falls result in a serious injury. So this slide shows the proportion of the falls that do result in a serious injury. And so the purple part of that pie is the 25% that do report a fall, and then that's projected to the full pie on the other side, and the blue section there is the 20% that result in a serious injury, such as a broken bone or a head injury. So the most serious of these injuries, as we all probably know intuitively, are hip fractures and traumatic brain injuries. So 95% of hip fractures are caused by falls. Half of those folks who have a hip fracture do not regain their full mobility that they had before the fall. 25% of those folks who lived independently before the fracture will require long-term nursing home care after the fall, and about 1 in 5 actually die within a year of the surgery. Now, a lot of times that's not directly due to the fracture, right? It's due to other compounding factors that have to do with the fall or the surgery or the recovery. So, some folks will die from pneumonia, but the underlying cause was the fall, the surgery, the recovery. Traumatic brain injuries are also a serious consequence of falling, especially because many older adults will take blood thinners to prevent other chronic disease events, right, like stroke or heart attack. And then if you fall and you're on those blood thinners, it's harder to stop the bleeding, right? So you might have more bleeding in the brain, which produces, or it's a higher chance then of having a brain injury. So who is more likely to die from falling? I know this chart is hard to see the details, but the important thing to look at here are the red squares. So this chart shows the leading causes of injury deaths among age groups. So you can see that age increases across the top of the chart, and the red square represents unintentional falls and is at the very top for the highest age group. So you can see, you know, as people are younger there, the red square is towards the bottom, right? Which means it's, you know, the 10th leading cause of injury deaths. But for older folks, it really climbs up there to being number one for people 65 and older. Now remember too, that's not all deaths, that's just injury deaths. And this chart is showing the proportion of those injury deaths due to falls, due to the next leading cause of injury deaths for older adults. So the three bars, the three different color bars show 10-year age categories. And I know, again, that's a little hard to see sometimes, but the dark blue is from 65 to 74. The green is 75 to 84, and then the gray is 85 and older. So you can see there that, you know, again, that goes back to that other chart that shows that the likelihood of falls increase with age. And we can see here too that unintentional death rates also follow that same trend. But what's, I think, really striking about this chart too is that it shows the higher prevalence of falls compared to the next category, which is motor vehicle traffic accidents. So you can see there that the likelihood of an unintentional death due to a fall is much, much, much higher than the next leading cause of an unintentional death, which is a car accident. And also the second, the fall category there, the numbers actually go way higher. It just would have made the proportion of the next one so minuscule that it would probably be really hard to see. So an older adult between the age of 75 and 84 is 3.5 times more likely to die from a fall than a car accident. But those over 85 are over 11 times more likely to die from a fall than a car accident. And that could be for two reasons, right? For one, your risk factors are higher the older that you get, and folks are probably driving a little less once they get, you know, over 85. But it's still a pretty shocking, I think, graphic. So why is this a growing burden? More falls mean more injuries. So the proportion of falls aren't necessarily increasing, but the population of older adults is increasing. And therefore, if the proportion of falls stays exactly the same, we're still going to see a lot more falls, right? And so we all know this. We've heard on the news for several years now, you know, the baby boomers are coming. Like, we all didn't know that, right? But starting in about 2011 is when the first baby boomer turned 65, and we'll continue to see about 10,000 folks turn 65 every single day for the next, I think it's another 12 or 13 years. I think that this chart really shows the impact of the baby boomer generation over time in a nice way. So you can see there that the blue graphs is the baby boomer generation. And so the first chart there on the left is it shows 1971, the whole population of the US. And the bottom there are ages 0, and then it goes up to 90 plus at the top. And then one side is female and the other side is male. So you can see there on the first chart that baby boomers were teenagers and young adults in 1971. And proportionately, there were many more baby boomers in 1971 than any other age of the population, as you can see there, right? And what's also interesting is at the very top, you can see that there weren't very many older adults in 1971. And I'll explain that in the next slide. And then if you fast forward to 2011, which is the middle graphic there, the boomers were were adults, so between about the age of 45 and 65. And you can see there that they still made up the largest part of the population proportionately. And But by 2030, so this is the future on the far right, you can see that the baby boomers will all be over 65 and will still make up a very significant proportion of the population. The closest second to that part of the segment of the population are the baby boomers' children's generation, which are the millennials. And you can see they're about the same amount of people. But then if, again, you look at the proportion of older adults from 2030 back from 1971, you know, these are new, these are just new issues that we have to figure out how to handle in an effective and you know, ethical way in society. So we didn't really have people aging as much in 1971. So we have to come up with some creative solutions to keep folks healthy. And part of the reason why there are more older adults, and there will continue to be more older adults than in, say, 1971 or any time previously, is because people are living longer. You can see here, this is a nice visualization that there are simply more older adults in the population. And it's not just due to the quantity of baby boomers, but also because the life expectancy of Americans have been increasing steadily since 1900. And you can see here that in 1900, at the far left of the chart here, that the life expectancy was just 47 years old. And in 2008, at the end of this chart, it was 78. And, you know, we can thank mostly public health innovations to this increase in life expectancy, such as vaccinations, better hygiene, better sanitation practices. So on the left side of this, most people died from communicable diseases, right? Like gastrointestinal infections, cholera, tuberculosis. And then as we've, you know, kind of solved many of those, or managed better many of those public health problems, you know, now more folks are dying from chronic diseases, which is what we would expect to see once a lot of those infectious diseases are better managed. And you can see there that dramatic dip there in 1918 was the Great Influenza. So why are older people more likely to fall? So this is something that we talk a lot about in the evidence-based program Matter Balance, but that age is a risk factor for falls, but falls are not an inevitable part of aging. However, many risk factors for falls are more common with age. And we're going to talk about risk factors being categorized into two main areas: intrinsic and extrinsic. So some of those intrinsic risk factors for falls are listed here, as well as extrinsic risk factors. So the intrinsic are the risk factors that happen within a person. And we'll talk a little bit later about what parts can be modified and which can't be modified. You know, our age is something that we can't change. So that would be a risk factor that is not modifiable. Women are more likely to fall than men. As we mentioned earlier, an older person is more likely to fall. So age is a risk factor. A history of falls is a risk factor for falls. So if you have fallen, you are more likely to fall again. Multiple chronic conditions will increase your risk for falls. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. And medications, and especially certain combinations, can be an increased risk factor for falls. And then, of course, muscle weakness, and especially the lower body muscle weakness. And that's intuitive, right? If we have weaker legs, we're going to have a harder time walking around, moving quickly, catching ourselves if we need to, etc. Some of the extrinsic risk factors for falls are those things that happen outside of our body and often in the community. So that would be anything in the environment that causes tripping, slipping, a loss of balance. At home, many of those things are rugs, cords, those pesky pets that always seem to be underfoot, stairs, bathrooms, we all know are a death trap, we talked about. And outside the home and also in the community, you know, there are uneven surfaces, sidewalks that have cracks in them. Weather conditions, of course, will affect someone's ability to walk smoothly on a surface. We all know right now, you know, as fall is here, that when the leaves cover the ground, and then especially when it rains, like today, it can be a little extra slippery. And then, of course, some other risk factors like bad lighting or bad shoes. So where and how do people fall? So this graph shows where and why some people fall. And from the green pie chart, you can see that more than half of falls occur inside and outside our home. Another quarter or so of falls happen in familiar places, while the remaining piece of the pie represents unfamiliar places. And this makes sense statistically, right? If you think about where do we spend most of our time? A lot of our time is going to be in and outside of our home. And a lot of time that we spend in our life is also going to be in familiar places. You know, the grocery store that we go to once a week, or, you know, an adult children's home, or church, or, you know, wherever, places that we're familiar with. The blue pie chart shows how people who did fall described the cause of the fall. So you can see there too that a vast majority of the falls were due to slips and trips. Misplaced and loss of balance make up some falls, but being knocked over and one's legs giving way contributed to a pretty small proportion of the causes of falls. And the reason I wanted to show this graph was to then better use our resources for intervention. You know, if we know what causes most of the falls, then we can spend more time trying to prevent those ones. And I know that we talk a lot about, you know, crowds knocking people over, and that's a big fear of a lot of older adults, and a valid fear, definitely, and something to think about as people are going to crowded events. But you can see there that it's a pretty small proportion of the causes of falls. So a lot of the things, again, the tripping and the slipping, are probably those things that we get a lot more comfortable with in our own familiar environment. And here are some of the reasons why those people from the previous slide in the same report fell. And the top 3 reasons there, which are actually at the bottom, but they're the highest proportion, are hurrying too much, which we're probably not surprised about, not looking where they were going, also probably not surprising, and then stepping on a wet or slippery surface. So I know anecdotally from many of the Matter Balance workshops that that's what I hear a lot, right, is that I'm slowing down, I'm thinking about where I'm going, I'm looking more carefully, I'm moving a little more slowly to make sure that I can avoid the next fall. So here are some of those risk factors that people may be able to change. And this is really where the power of preventing falls comes into play. There are many risk factors that are modifiable, which means that we have some control over them. Muscle weakness. Of course we have control over that, right? We can exercise, we can do strength training, we can do balance and flexibility training, and really increase muscle weakness to be stronger and prevent a fall. Some vision problems. Now, we may not be able to stop all vision problems from happening as we get older, but we can certainly make sure that our prescription for our glasses is up to date and just go to the eye doctor and get screened and tested and do whatever we can to make sure that that risk factor is minimized as much as possible. We can reduce the fear of falling. So as you all know, the fear of falling is a risk factor all by itself. And so there are workshops like A Matter of Balance that folks can take to try to navigate their world and their environments without being paralyzed by that fear, which again will result in a fall if people don't take action and live their life. The home environment. Again, maybe we may not be able to install, a motorized stair lift, but there are still plenty of things that are free or very low cost that someone can do to modify their home environment to make it safer. Footwear. It'd be hard to convince my mother that yes, that is in fact modifiable, but and then some medications and the timing of medications are also something that may be able to be changed. So again, maybe not all those things, but some of them, at least of the timing, may be worth looking at. For instance, I know that the diuretics, for instance, the medications that make you go to the bathroom. If you take those at night, then you might take multiple trips to the bathroom over the nighttime, and thus increasing your risk for falling. Where maybe that's something that working with your doctor or pharmacist you could decide to take in the morning, and then have more trips to the bathroom when you're awake and more alert. And then some of those non-modifiable risk factors for falls are age and gender. Some medical conditions, of course, aren't going to be able to be changed or improved. Some medications and timing aren't going to be modifiable either. And then some community environments are never going to be able to be completely perfect, right? Sidewalks may never be repaired at the level that they need to be in order to be safe, but there are still ways that we can mitigate some of that risk. So the National Council on Aging has 6 steps to prevent a fall. And the first one, and arguably one of the most important too, would be finding a good balance and exercise program. And this one can be in the form of A Matter of Balance to get started on exercise and to help reduce the fear of falling. But there are many agencies across the country that offer programs like Matter of Balance and Stepping On. These are small group, multi-session workshops. Additionally, there are myriad exercise programs in the community that can help increase your strength and flexibility and balance and endurance that can reduce your risk of falling. And specific kinds of Tai Chi are even shown to be evidence-based to reduce falls. Who else can you talk to? Many people are afraid to speak with their healthcare providers about their fear of falling or that they have fallen because they're afraid they're going to be viewed as not being able to keep their independence, or that they're going to be put away in a home. Mimi, do you have a question?
I had a question about the previous slide.
Yes.
You were saying about Tai Chi. Is that something that Oasis is offering now, some type of way, or?
Yes. Oasis does have many instructors in the Tai Chi for Arthritis for Fall Prevention program. That is one of the 2 evidence-based programs across the globe, really, that show effectiveness in preventing falls. But that being said, any exercise is better than no exercise, and any exercise will definitely improve your chances of preventing a fall. Good question, though. So it's always recommended to talk to your healthcare provider about falls that you have had or even your fear of falling. There are many medical interventions that may reduce your risk. It could be a medication combination, like we talked about a little bit earlier. It could be a vitamin D deficiency. You maybe need a calcium supplement. You can get a referral potentially to a therapist if you talk to your physician. But if you don't talk to your physician, you may not get those answers. So it is always a good idea to speak with your healthcare team. But who else can I talk to? I think sometimes that we all forget that our pharmacist is part of our healthcare team. So you can talk to him or her anytime about your medications, including over-the-counter medications. And it's always recommended to keep a list of all the medications that you're taking, including the over-the-counter medications. I know some of us, we use this pharmacy for this medication or this pharmacy for this medication, trying to get the best deal. And so even when you're using, a pharmacy is using the same system, they may not have all of the things that you're taking. So just remember that you're the only one who knows everything that you're doing and everything that you're taking. So, but you can always go in with that list and talk to a pharmacist. And those regular checkups are crucial to making sure that you are reducing your risk factors for falls. And as we kind of mentioned earlier, making sure that vision and hearing is a part of that. Without some of those other senses functioning at their fullest capacity, you're going to be increasing a risk for falls. Modifying your home is, of course, important, and you can see there on the left-hand side, it's just a stairwell showing a nice handrail, and the landing at the top has a nice, a pretty big platform there, so you can hopefully open the door and also get around the door safely while you're holding onto the rail. And the right side shows a very bad example of clutter and potential fall hazards as this person is standing up from the chair. Yes, ma'am.
Any research on which kind of flooring is better for older adults, like hardwood floors or carpet?
Whew. I have never come across that specifically. I guess it would probably my educated guess would be that it would probably not matter as long as the carpet is tacked down, or if you have hardwood floors, that you don't have a lot of rugs on top of it, and that they're not too slippery. Sometimes if you put many coats of a varnish on there, it can kind of act like ice. And then of course that you're wearing the correct footwear for that. Sometimes easier to maybe drag your feet on carpet and get a little stuck that way, or wearing slippery socks on hardwood. So kind of got to try to find that perfect balance of, yeah, exactly. So I don't think there's quite one blanket answer, but whatever you got at home can probably work with it and make it safer. And then finally, the sixth step here is to get support. Talk to your family members. They can help you get what you need, hopefully, and help support you in efforts to do things like modifying your home or making sure that they understand the importance of exercise and remaining independent, as that is most people's ultimate goal. And just remember that most falls are preventable. So feel free to contact us if you have any more questions or would like more information about falls prevention. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm surprised that this doesn't have, on here about like the Department of Aging and those other resources that are available for, like what you said, to make your home safe. If you need some bars in the bathroom, like we said, that's like a death trap. I myself last week fell out the bathtub, and stuff. I don't have anything making it safe.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point. So the amount of resources available will really vary, maybe widely community to community. but you can always start with your local area agency on aging, and they usually have an an information kind of helpline that is the best resource for all the other additional resources. If they can't directly guide you for some help like that, they are likely the ones who know who can. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much.